Hi, it's Dr. Ray, and welcome to week 4 of Science Fiction Literature, our winter course. As I take us into the crazy stories that we are examining this week, I thought I would start first with my mug of the week. So, what I have is it says, if I can get it, I would prefer not to, which is from Herman Melville. You might know wrote Moby Dick. He also has a fabulous short story called Bartleby the Scrivener. And when Bartleby is asked to do tasks that aren't, what's the word I'm looking for, pleasant or enjoyable, he just says, I would prefer not to. And that baffles everyone around him because it's just antithetical to the ideologies of the age. And I love that saying, so I love my mug. What I am not loving is the faux non-dairy creamer in my coffee today, but that's neither here nor there. Okay, so what's the first thing you need to do this week? Obviously, watch this video. You're doing that. Read the 2 short stories, Ted Chiang's Exaltation and Charles Stross's Rogue Farm. And be sure to watch the videos below. The one I mandated, or I'm like, you need to watch this to understand, is I found a very useful video on the technological singularity, which I'll get into in a second. And I feel like understanding that is key to appreciating these stories and to retrospect some of the stories that we've already read. And recommended videos. As I was reading Exaltation, I just kept thinking of this talk that Neil deGrasse Tyson gave on the most startling fact about our universe, about stars, and we're all made of stardust, and it's fantastic. And I think you'll see the connection too. It's like 3 minutes, and then because the authors we're reading are very much contemporary and alive and with us. There's and relatively new to the scene. I mean, compared to the ones we've read so far, I couldn't find like here's their biography. So I have them actually, talking about what it is that they do in their work, and I thought that might be useful in giving like a face and a sense of who they are to the authors themselves. So those are recommended. I wish I could mandate, but I'm saying you need to watch the video on the technological singularity to give you some guidance. What do you need to do this week? You need to post, like we have before, on the story, assigned by the first letter of your last name. Respond to a classmate before Sunday. Take quiz 2, which will be just like quiz 1, except it's going to be on the stories of the last 2 weeks and concepts present in the introduction. And I'll go over some of those, like technological singularity and novum are certainly going to be important in the quiz. I won't be referring to the stories from the first half of the semester specifically. And then the paper itself is due January 19th, so I'll create another module. So I kind of like half of a week 5, but it's not a week 5. It's just going to be a link where you can submit the paper by January 19th. Again, 3 pages. I've suggested you choose one short story and do a close reading. If you want to do something different, like if you want to combine several short stories and talk about how they represent, AI or something like that, that's cool. But I would just contact me in advance because I want to make sure it's not a topic that's so big that you can't complete it in like 3 to 6 pages, because it's meant to be, quality over quantity, like a nice, concise, not trying to rhyme here, representation of your thoughts about some of these readings. So with that in mind, let's just dive straight into the discussion board and these stories. And oh my gosh, my background is Victorian literature. Like I've spent most of my life finding connections between literature and history and evolution and sociology. So this is so outside of my purview of expertise, and I'm very grateful to my dad. Actually, I think I mentioned my father is a computer science professor, and he's really big into like astronomy. And when my kids have questions about the Big Bang Theory or black holes or red dwarfs, I'm like, call Grampy, and they talk to my dad about it. So I've been spending hours talking to my dad about these things, watching videos, reading articles. And this morning, my husband finally said, stop researching and write the paper, which when I was doing my dissertation was, stop just doing more and more and more reading, making yourself crazy, like just start writing. So I'm making this, I've got to stop the research and trying to explain these concepts and just do my best, with the caveat that if your background is technology, you're majoring in computer science, biology, if you're a hardcore science fiction reader, you know more than me on this, and that's fine. That's fantastic, and feel free to correct me if you put comments in the bottom of the video if you think I've misquoted something or misrepresented an idea or theory, but I have done my very best and I have learned a whole lot, and I've had lots of WTF moments this week trying to wrap my head around these stories. So let's start with the term. It's a couple terms we need to go over again. If I can bring this. Novum, that was in the introduction to our anthology here, the Wesleyan anthology, and it's a plausible innovation in science fiction narratives, right? So I'm thinking about, what's a good example from something that we've read recently? Sorry, my brain is just freezing. My brain's going to movies. But just like an invention you see, and we're just supposed to accept it, that's just part of that world, right? And so we just have to kind of go with the flow on that. Other things to think about this week in terms of the things we're reading: the technological singularity, which I've had watched so many videos and read so much about, and it's starting to just, haunt my dreams and my nightmares. The hypothetical point in time at which technological growth becomes uncontrollable and irreversible. It can also be seen as the ideas when superintelligence surpasses human intelligence. It's something that's given Elon Musk, and when he was still with us, Stephen Hawking, pause. The name of the scientist is eluding me, but he predicted it as being the year 2049 we would reach this point. The video I posted, I think, is really useful on this concept and understanding it. Other term and keep in mind uploading, right? Give you some examples. I don't know if anyone's seen Captain America Winter Soldier, my personal favorite Marvel movie. When the evil Nazi scientist who's been dead for decades had uploaded his consciousness into like all these 80s like PCs, right? To like take your memories and who you are and somehow upload them into another being or into a computer. A great example of this would be if you saw Altered Carbon. It was was it a comic book? It was a series before it was a film, a TV series. But the first season's fantastic. It's on Netflix. I highly recommend it. But it's the idea of, you take your consciousness and you can just plug it into a new body, a sleeve, as they call it. And if you are impoverished, that sleeve might be like, a sick elderly person. And if you're rich, you can just keep uploading your consciousness into supermodels, right? So that's just something to think about, and that's certainly relevant to Rogue Farm. And the last topic I wanted to bring up is, if I can bring it over, the death of the universe, right? Because we're going big this week and might as well continue. Of course, there's the idea of the heat death of our universe, of our the sun. This is where the scientists can come in and correct me. Collapses on itself, explodes, burns out, and there's everything as we know it disappears. It can also be seen on a smaller level, like, will all technological civilizations ultimately destroy themselves? And we can look at this throughout human history, and also kind of, if we're thinking of exaltation, what are we doing to our planet right now in terms of resources and technology? We can tie this back to the technological singularity. So again, you can see the kind of mind F that I've been going through this week, trying to prepare myself to prepare you for these stories. So let's go to Rogue Farm by Charles Stross. And apparently it was, sorry, I need a sip of coffee to get through this. It was, they animated it, and I have not seen that, and I'm not sure I'm going to. But the story, I tried to explain it to my husband, and he just stared at me slack-jawed for 5 minutes. But basically, it's in the future, past the point of the technological singularity, and it's in England, and supposedly squatters, but these people Maddie and Joe are married, and they have a farm and 8-legged cows, and there's something that's called farms, which is kind of where humans select to grow together and create, not like a hive, not like the clones we saw in Ursula Le Guin, but kind of like this amorphous, multi-legged blob. I don't know if anyone's ever seen Spirited Away. That it's beautiful, Japanese animated film, but there's a point with this monstrous creature like greed that kind of like slides through the bathhouse, and that's all I could picture when I was reading about the farm. But so these farms, right, the rogue farm of these humans that have kind of like bonded together, their goal is to shoot up to Jupiter, and to do this they have to kind of stick the trunks of their legs into the ground, and somehow they can use the sap from trees to create the explosion necessary to launch themselves upwards, but that destroys the land near the launch site. And so when this rogue farm, this blob shows up on their property, Joe and Maddie scared away, and then it settles down nearby, getting ready make the explosion up to Jupiter, and Joe is dead set on destroying it. So it can't damage the land near their property. And I haven't even ruined the story for you. I've just provided some context so you can read it. But it is fascinating, and hands down, the best part is when he gets high with his dog. And yeah, no, I'm not joking about that. That the dog, if you've ever seen the movie Up, which I know seems like a tangent to go to Pixar, where there's an inventor that's created these kind of voice boxes that go on dogs so dogs can communicate their basic thoughts and feelings. So they have this semi-sentient dog named Bob that he's gone to talk to, and the dog is smoking weed during their conversation. So this is on page 737. When Joe finally staggered home in the small hours, a thin plume of smoke was rising from Bob's kennel. Joe paused in front of the kitchen door and sniffed anxiously, then relaxed. Letting go of the door handle, he walked over to the kennel and sat down outside. Bob was most particular about his den. Even his own humans didn't go in there without an invitation. So Joe waited. A moment later, there was an interrogative cough from inside. A dark-pointed snout came out, dribbling smoke from its nostrils like a particularly vulpine dragon. Some? A metallic click. Smoke good. Smoke joke. Cough tickle. Funny. Arf. Yeah, I don't mind if I do, Joe said. The snout pulled back into the kennel. A moment later, it reappeared, teeth clutching a length of hose with the mouthpiece on one end. Joe accepted it graciously, wiped off the mouthpiece, leaned against the side of the kennel, and inhaled. The weed was potent and smooth. Within a few seconds, the uneasy dialogue in his head was still. Wow, that's a good turn-up. Arf. Joe felt himself relaxing. Maddie would be upstairs, snoring quietly in their decrepit bed, waiting for him maybe. But sometimes a man just had to be alone with his dog and a good joint doing man and dog stuff. Just such a wonderful moment of levity in this crazy, crazy story. I haven't given away the plot twists, or I will stop there. I'm just going to stop there because this story really tapped my resources in my brain, and it hurts. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm glad I read it, and it's challenged me that I really need to dig into more SciFI and continue to push beyond my usual parameters of what I consider, my taste in literature. So the question this week is very similar to last week in that I'm giving you a lot of flexibility and freedom in terms of what's a theme or message or conflicts that stood out to you and how he's communicating that. But I've also said, what connections do you see between this story and other TV shows and films? So if you can find, I'm sure you'll find so many more than I did, but the ones that stood out to me the most were Altered Carbon, I guess I mentioned Up, Spirited Away, a couple of things like that. So just keep that in mind as you're reading, and I would love to see what connections you make and what you think of Charles Stross, because I feel like after reading this story, you either want to run away from his literature screaming or go buy everything that he's ever written. And I must confess, I have not made my decision yet on his prose. The next one is so different, and it was written, I think they were written within 5 years of each other, but Ted Chiang's Exaltation, I'm, again, very grateful that I had my dad as a resource, because Ted Chiang himself is a computer scientist, and the first 5 pages in many ways kind of read like a computer science student's dissertation. So obviously you're in an alternate reality, of course, and the beings that live there run on compressed argon that they kind of pull up from beneath the core of the planet that they live on, and it's basically iron lungs that they exchange, like they go to stations and they replace when they've used up the compressed argon that pumps the piston and keeps their bodies going. If I'm explaining that at all. In other ways, they seem very much human. They live kind of below this like half sphere that they can't escape through. And again, your brain takes you to random connections. All I can think about is the Simpsons movie when they put the dome over Springfield. But that's not what he's going for. It's just that they cannot escape beyond the confines of their existence and their society. And the guy that's writing is one of these beings, and he's an anatomist, so he studies how the body works, and he wants to understand why there's been changes in their brains. And I'll let you dig into that. But he can't find like a body to dissect and look into because they tend to combust and explode when they do die. So he takes apart his own brain, and the way he describes this is just mind-boggling. And just the theory behind it that, again, following up with people who have a background in this area, is legitimate. Like it ties to things like Alan Turing has said. It ties to early computers. Like it's not just, oh, I'm gonna have this fantasy where these people are robots and they can just take themselves apart. I mean, it sounds plausible. It's so fascinating. And what he finds out, and I don't want to ruin the story too much. Basically that society is inevitably going to end. And I will let you read that and figure out his reaction to that and other groups' reactions to that. But I'm on 754, and this is the second full paragraph. At some point, our limbs will cease moving altogether. I cannot be certain of the precise sequence of events near the end, but I imagine a scenario in which our thoughts will continue to operate, so that we remain conscious but frozen, immobile as statues. Perhaps we'll be able to speak for a while longer because of our voice boxes operate on a smaller pressure differential than our limbs, but without the ability to visit a filling station, every utterance will reduce the amount of air left for thought and bring us closer to the moment that our thoughts cease altogether. Will it be preferable to remain mute, to prolong our ability to think, or to talk until the very end? I don't know. So there's lots of connections to kind of thoughts on death of the universe, on the end of society, on the meaning of things, and that's what really led me to the Neil deGrasse Tyson video, which I recommend. So this week is intense. Give yourself time to read. Even if you don't love these stories, take your time with them. Again, they really challenged me. The Exaltation story was so scientific. It took a lot of intense reflection and focus on my part to understand what he was saying. And it's okay if you don't understand all of it. I'm still grappling with it. But the ending of that story is particularly beautiful. And maybe that's just a good, metaphor for life in some ways, right? It's the hard parts are worth it for what we get. So keep that in mind. Look at the homework. What is due this week is reading the stories, the discussion boards, and the quiz, which I'm going to post tomorrow on Monday. And then I will have a link up here, which I will also post tomorrow for where you can submit the paper, but that isn't due until the 19th. Thank you for all your hard work. I have office hours tomorrow, and thanks for taking me on this adventure.